Hello, everyone. Welcome to week one live session for psychology. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We are also trying to hook up to a group of students in Cerritos. They haven't quite joined us, but Katisha is wrapping up the course right now, so they should be popping in momentarily, and we should see them when they arrive. So I'm going to begin, as I usually do for a live session, by discussing what we are going to cover tonight. That we will start with the checklist, and we'll take a look at all of the things that are due this week. If you're new to online classes, I don't think most of us are, but I do think there are some new folks with us in this class, especially those that are just starting the healthcare management program. So welcome to Fremont if you're brand new with us, and welcome to psychology if you have been around for a little while. What I'd like to do is take the opportunity to make these sessions as interactive as possible. So, but the drawback of doing that is that it takes a little bit more time. But I'd like to keep everybody engaged, so it's going to strike sort of a balance in between keeping everyone engaged and participating and getting enough information across. But I definitely don't want to be talking the whole entire time. So what I'm going to do now is give you a chance to use the microphone to say hello. I'd like you to introduce yourself, give us your name, what program you're in, how long you've been at Fremont College, and also what do you think psychology is? What is psychology? So again, you're going to press your microphone. You're going to use the yellow microphone right here. Also, at any time, you can raise your hand by clicking on the little hand here, and that'll raise your hand so I can pause to let you use the microphone. Also, sometimes I have people type into the chat bar right here to make sure that we are keeping things flowing. We'll see how this works with connecting to the group of students that are in Cerritos. So I'm going to go ahead. So one thing you have to remember, though, when you're using the microphone is you press it once to talk and press it again to stop. If you don't press it again to turn it off, nobody else can talk. So we're just going to have to wait for you to turn your microphone on. Okay, so what I'd like to do, let's go in order that you're listed. I think you're probably listed in the same order that you see here. So Philippe, you're first, and then on down the line. So Philippe, let's start. All you have to do is click on your microphone. You're giving us, again, your name, your program, program, how long you've been here at Fremont College, and what do you think psychology is? All right, let's give this a shot. Philippe, you're up.
Can you hear me?
How'd you do that?
Can you hear me too? Hello? It's moving.
So don't forget, when you are using a microphone, whoever that was, you had an awful lot of echo, but don't forget you have to turn it right back off, otherwise nobody can say anything. So when you say hello, and then nobody can say anything because you need to turn mic back off. So let's try that again. Philippe, you are, do not have a microphone. So next we have Javes, is it? I hope I'm saying that right. Go ahead. And this is going as well as expected, which was not too well. Let's try one more, shall we? How about Camille Moore? Let's try that. Okay, how many, oh, okay. Philippe, how many students are over there at the Cerritos campus? Oh, okay. And you guys are all using one computer, right? But the microphone for that one computer is not working? So you're logging in on different separate computers. Oh, well, that's fine. You should be able to use the microphone. So, that is not working. So it looks like if you're on the Macs over in Cerritos, you're not going to be able to use your microphone. So let's for tonight, so that we can keep the presentation flowing okay. You'll be hearing a little bit lopsided more than everybody else, unfortunately. All right. Phone turns down, and then I yell, and it turns down, and then you can't hear me. So hopefully, is that a little bit better? Are you guys hearing me a little bit more clearly now? Let me know if you're able to hear a little bit better now. How about now? Can you guys hear me now? If anybody can hear me, please type yes into the chat window. Okay, good. All right, so I'm not going to bother doing that. So for the students in Cerritos, are you all trying to hear on the individual computers? I think if you can have Katisha put on the computer in the front and turn the speaker on, that will be better. I sounded like Donald Duck. Well, I sound kind of like that anyway, but I honestly, I think there's something going on with the okay. So obviously there's something going on with the audio that's making me sound like a chipmunk. So, okay, is it sounding a little bit better? Let me know. If you, in Cerritos, I would urge you to turn the speaker on in the classroom so that everybody can hear me loud and clear. Okay. So now, why don't you go ahead and try typing into the chat window. What do you think psychology is? So back to the topic at hand, we are in Introduction to Psychology. So what do you think psychology is? If you were to try to say it in a few words, one sentence or less, what the heck is psychology? Take your best shot at that, and you really give it some thought, because you know, you hear the word all of the time, and now we're taking a class on it. So what do you think psychology is? Okay, we're getting some good guesses. Study of human emotion, Camille says. Study of human behavior. Philippe, you're very right on the money. But it's not just the study of human behavior. Roshan, very, very good. It's learning about the human mind, right? Absolutely. Study of the brain and functions. So you guys are very, very close. Actually, you're all right in different ways. But we say psychology goes beyond the study of the mind. Really, in the beginning, people wanted to know what's going on in people's brains and why do people do the things that they do. So if you've ever looked at anybody else in your life and thought, what in the world is making this person act this way? You have asked yourself the very fundamental question that all psychologists ask. Why do people act the way they do? But the thing is, with psychology, you can't just study the mind, right? I don't know how good this will work over the computer, but I'm going to allow you guys to go ahead and study my mind. So I'm going to give you mental energy to study my mind, right? So here we go. Study my mind. Nah, it's not really working, is it? Why doesn't it work to just study the mind? Because the mind, obviously, you don't know what's going on in there. You have no clue. And how do we know what's going on in people's brains? When you think about it, you can't really know, can you? But one thing you can know is what people do. So that's why, in the beginning, and how old do you think the formal study of psychology is? Give some guesses into your chat window. How many years do you think academics have been formally studying the field of psychology? And the real definition of psychology is study of human behavior. And what we think is the underlying mental processes that underlie behavior. Roshan, you're about the closest. 130 years, I would say it's been about 120, somewhere in there, late 1900s, or late 1800s was when psychology really first started going along. So it's really a young discipline compared to things like biology and medicine and mathematics. Yeah, but you're not too far off with 25. It's actually a really, really young field. It's one of the younger formal academic disciplines that we have. So what we're going to do tonight, I'm going to start off with our checklist and take a look at our checklist, and then we're going to go through some PowerPoint slides. I've made these PowerPoint slides available, not here in Dropbox, but in doc sharing. So when you go to doc sharing, you'll be able to see the slides. And I have a very slow internet connection. What I think is going on here may be the internet connection. So I will try, please do let me know if the sound starts to cut off. I think what's happening is maybe the internet connection. So here in doc sharing, did I share my screen? I need to do that. Is where the PowerPoint slides will be posted. So you can find them there in doc sharing, and I have put the first chapter up already. So when we see the slides, you'll know where you can go get them. We're never going to be able to cover all of the slides. It would take a few hours to cover all of the slides each week. So I'm going to flip through and cover some of the important ones, but I'll post all of the slides for you as supplements to your learning. Let's take a look at this week's checklist. We have the chapter 1 of the ebook that is regarding the study of psychology. It's the background, the history of psychology, and also how psychology is a science. And also in there covers the different fields or aspects within psychology. You have your online presentation. They're really pretty cool in this class. They look pretty slick, so definitely check those out and interact. They're very interactive, great presentations in this course. Then you have 2 discussions, discussion 1.1, 1.2, and you have assignment 1.1 and assignment 1.2. We will cover these, and then we also have a quiz. So I need to unhide this. I'll be unhiding that quiz for you shortly. All right, is everybody still hearing me okay? I hope so. So first, we'll take a look at the discussion, and anytime that we're going to cover some material for this, I'll let you know if we're going to cover the material on the slide. So our first discussion is basically just posting your name, background, profession, what you hope to gain from this course, and everybody has already gotten started very well in this discussion. The next one is answering what is psychology. So how locate information to answer the following question. So you're going to follow this link here, and let's open up this new tab for you so you can see it. And you're going to basically research the different types of careers that are available in psychology. So this is an article about all of the different types of careers that you can do. So you want to read this article and look through there, and then come back here to our discussion and say, how would you classify this discussion? What does a psychologist do? What areas of study make up the field? And what types of disorders are in the field? So we're going to look a little bit at the different psychologists, and you can study the actual field or that psychologists do. So that's a type of psychologist. You can also be a counselor. And then we're going to look at the different areas that people study in psychology. And we'll talk briefly about different disorders that are in the field too. We're not really formally getting into disorders until we get to the chapter on disorders. So concentrate mostly for this discussion on what aspect of psychology most interests you and why. So really, this question right here is what you want to do, is what you want to answer. What's the most interesting place of psychology? Is it developmental? Is it biological psychology, learning, memory, consciousness, etc.? We'll cover those in a moment. All right. Looks like we have one hand raised. So not sure who that was, but I think it was Roshan. Go ahead and type your question into the chat menu. And if not, if you want the microphone, just type in microphone and I'll do it. All right, moving on to the assignments for this week. The first one, this is a really cool website over here from the American Psychological Association. I'm going to open up this one. You're going to go to this website and you're going to put in any 2 days of the year. You should make one of the days be your birthday just to make it sort of interesting. And it will give you a whole bunch of events that happened in psychology on that day. So my birthday happens to be June 6th, also known as D-Day. And we'll see what happened there. So you can see all of the different things that happened on your birthday throughout the years in the study of psychology. So take something interesting from here that you see and maybe do a little bit more research on it so that you can write about a paragraph on it. So let's say I say, oh, here, E.L. Thorndike's Educational Psychology, The Original Nature of Man, was published. So maybe I want to look up E.L. Thorndike and see what he was all about, and maybe I'll put him in the Google search. If you have Firefox, you may have this window up here to Google things, and check it out. And there I find out Edward Thorndike, and I can look up some information about him for my summary paragraph. And that's how you will do assignment number 1.1. Are there any questions on that? Assignment 1.2, we have a couple of websites also to go to. So you are going to use the internet to explore the field of psychology in terms of issues, trends, and various perspectives. Visit these websites to get ideas about the scope of the field of psychology. So here's the American Psychological Association and the Psychology Help Center. Based on the research you conducted and what you learned in this lesson, write a 1.5-page paper identifying current trends, issues, and various perspectives on psychology. So this is kind of taking the discussion question to the next level, and you're going to discuss what you believe to be the basis of psychology. So what are the main areas that are being studied in psychology? That will take you to the American Psychological Association and the Psychology Help Center. So take a quick look at those just for your information. That's not connecting too fast, but we'll come back to that. All right, are there any questions on the discussions or the assignment? And this quiz, I will unlock right now. All right, I think I've got the world's worst internet connection here for some reason, so sorry guys. Are you guys still hearing me okay? All right, let me know if you are able to hear me right now so that I can make sure to make any necessary changes to the audio. Okay, looks like now we're hearing. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Okay, your quiz is now available too. I already fixed that. So we've got the quiz for this week as well. The live session, most of you are attending. Make sure that you have typed something in this window so that I can go back at the end and scroll through and make sure everybody has is recorded for attendance. If you cannot make the live sessions during the week, you are strongly urged to come on campus and do these. However, if you can't make it, you can watch the recording and submit a 1-paragraph summary. But we will much rather have you come on campus for this once a week. So if you made it happen this week, we got 9 more and then we're done. All right, so let's take a look at a couple of things that we're talking about this week in the chapter. And we're talking about what psychology is. I'm going to leave the screen like this. I'm not going to go to full screen PowerPoint because that tends to block off the chat window so that I can't see your questions. So as I said, psychology is the scientific study of behavior and the mental processes that underlie behavior. So we can scientifically study behavior because we can observe behavior. But thoughts are not really observable. So that's why psychology really became the study of human behavior. And from there, we make guesses as to what in the brain is causing the behavior and what behaviors do also to cause events to happen in the brain. However, we can't always be sure, and that's where the imperfection in the field of psychology comes in, because we're always not only observing, but we're also explaining. Right? So a couple of things that psychology likes to do, we not only like to describe what someone is doing or what their behavior is, but we'd like to try to explain why it's happening, and that turns into what we call a theory. A theory is just a string of observations that come together and starts to make sense into one theme. Also, psychology likes to try to predict behavior. Right? So if we find that high school students tend to be more depressed at the last month of the school year than the first month of the school year. Well, how would we know that? Well, that's where the science of psychology comes in. We try to study things like this and see where the patterns are so that it helps us predict things and also possibly control things. So if we're finding that students are more depressed in the last month of school, maybe there's something that we can do about that. And that becomes the application in the field of psychology. So it's all the way from observing behavior to explaining it to figuring out what we can do now that we know this. Now, in your assignments, you're going to be discussing the various fields or subfields, we call them, in psychology. So now let's take a look at some of the perspectives that make up modern psychology. Well, since we're covering sort of the history of psychology, if you read this week's chapter, it's kind of all about the history of how psychology started. Structuralism is a way of thinking about thoughts or thinking about the mind that it's a very young perspective in psychology. This is really the first psychologists they wanted to be real scientific about the study, so they said, we're only going to study what we believe are the structures of thought. So they would do things like, and you can try this, try putting your hand on your keyboard. Don't touch any buttons, but just feel the buttons. And if you were to describe the sensations happening in your brain as a result of feeling the keyboard, right, this is what these early psychologists would have called, aha, that's a structure. That sensation that's happening to you and what it does in your brain is the structures of thought. This was primarily put forth by a guy named Wilhelm Wundt in psychology, and he basically established the very first psychological research laboratory. So if you wanted to put who is the kind of first psychologist, Wilhelm Wundt is often considered one of the founding fathers of psychology, or the founding father, but it always depends on what perspective you take, because many of the things we study in psychology go all the way back to Descartes and even before with the field of philosophy. All right, so after structuralism, and there are some more people that believe in structuralism, came functionalism. And it was not really enough just to say, okay, we're only going to study the structures of how we think, because it kind of came to a dead end. And there wasn't a whole lot more they could say about it. So a guy named William James came along, and this guy was an American, and he had the first psychological research laboratory in America. And he said, let's not just study like the structures of what we think is thought, but let's study the function. So when, okay, maybe I'm cutting off again. I'll give it a couple of seconds. Usually I think what's happening is that I'm getting a bad internet connection, and then it catches up. So if you let me know that I'm cutting off, I'll take a little pause, and then hopefully it catches up. And when it gets better, you can let me know. I will talk to the IT folks about possibly this Wi-Fi connection. Anyhow, so then we got into functionalism in psychology, and we wanted to study how the mind functions. So let's say, okay, well, I touch my keyboard, or back then it was like your pen or your pencil or whatever it may be, and then I remember what I touched, right? So now I learned something, some information came into the brain, it was processed in the brain, and then I recalled that feature. So those became known as the functions of the mind. What the mind does, how we learn, how we recall information, and how we use that information later. And so functionalism became the second real school of thought in psychology after structuralism. And then came along something called Gestalt psychology. Now this didn't last a whole long time, but really it was starting to really put all of the little pieces together. And Gestalt ideas said your behavior is not just a thought, it's not just a stimulus that makes you respond in a certain way, it's not just your memories that color how you experience something, and it's not just the way that you act in response to a stimulus, but it's all of those things put all together, and that makes the human being. And they called this Gestalt psychology. So they were really saying, hey, let's get away from looking at things on a micro level, and let's look at the big picture, and we can talk about all of the things that go into making up the human behavior. Here's a good demonstration of Gestalt psychology. So, and back in these days, they really focused on what we call perception. We're going to study perception in this class, but this is an example of perception and how you see a full circle instead of just a group of dots or a circle with a hole in it. All right, and then we moved into getting into psychoanalysis. And this is where Sigmund Freud came along and said, hey, we can use all of this information we've been studying. So this has been about 30 years now. We've been studying psychology and the human behavior. What can we do to help people with this? And so Freud established what we now know as psychotherapy. So if you've ever heard of people going to see their therapist and sitting down and talking about their problem, that all came from Sigmund Freud. There was no such thing as psychotherapy before him. And that's one of the things that make him ultra famous in this field. Another school of thought that came along with psychology is behaviorism. Behaviorism really came about basically in the 1950s when we started thinking, okay, let's get back to being as scientific as possible. And all of these things we've been talking about, you know, your memories, your learning, the thoughts, the stimuli, let's get rid of all that and let's just think about how we behave. Because really the only thing we can do is we can observe human behavior. And so people like John Watson and B.F. Skinner really started to do these experiments on people and see how we learn and how we are conditioned. So John Watson performed this famous experiment on what we now call Little Albert. And Little Albert was a baby, and he wanted to see if human beings were naturally kind of afraid of rats, or are they conditioned to be afraid of rats. And if you see a little baby who's never seen a rat, they're really not afraid of the rat. So it seems to be that we are conditioned to be afraid. And so there's a couple of cool reasons why we mentioned this story in this class. Number one is because we're studying behaviorism and we're talking about how these people studied psychology. But also we take a look at ethics in the field of psychology and what we're allowed to do as actual experiments. So we can't do experiments like this anymore. And you'll see why when I tell you what it was. Okay, so little Albert was a baby about 1 year old. And John Watson decided to condition this baby to become afraid of a white rat. So the first time that little Albert sees the white rat, right, nothing really happens. No problem, there's a white rat, and baby kind of looks at it. And then John Watson comes over and he takes this really loud kind of like drum cymbals and makes this huge noise, really loud. And babies do not like this, right? If you know about babies, they do not like sudden loud noises. It's very upsetting to them. So after pairing, and this is what they call it in behaviorist psychology, they pair the rat and the loud noise together and present it to little Albert over and over and over again, right? Until every time that little Albert now sees the white rat, he is scared to death of the white rat because it has been paired with the loud noise, which actually really makes him nervous. All right, I'll take a quick pause here. I know Katisha sent me an email, so I wanted to see what was going on there. All right, yeah, we're talking about some of the problems with the sound. So we've got a couple of more slides to cover after this, and then we're going to go ahead and cut it off for the evening. So, and we'll see what we can do about resolving some of these sound issues. Actually, the sound coming over from Cerritos with Katisha was that it cannot be done anymore. We now have guidelines for the use of human subjects. And one of the problems with little Albert is but not only can we become conditioned to be afraid of certain things, but these fears can generalize to other things that are similar to the original. So baby Albert not only became afraid of white rats, but also afraid of John Watson's own white hair and white cloth and snow and Santa Claus. So basically, the poor little baby was damaged for the rest of his life, and this was kind of brushed under the carpet in psychology for a long time, and then we figured out. Okay, so apparently there's absolutely no sound now. So I'll give it a moment to catch up, and I'm going to bring us to a slide to end on. All right, so if you can hear me now, I'm going to make this the last slide. I know we're having some audio problems, and I'm not sure what exactly is going on, but we are going to try to fix those issues as soon as we can. So this is the last slide, and this shows the areas where people are working in psychology. So many people work in the federal government. Many people work at universities, and they call themselves psychologists because they're the people that are doing psychological studies and trying to advance our knowledge in psychology. Lots of psychologists work at schools. So many of them are self-employed, and many of them are in private for-profit businesses. Taking a look over here at the different subfields of psychology. So we have a lot of people studying educational psychology. So that's studying how human beings learn and how that can be applied in the school system. A huge amount of psychologists are clinical psychologists. And these are people that practice psychotherapy and other forms of therapy in clinics or hospitals. Other psychologists are what we call cognitive psychologists. These are also probably research psychologists, and they're studying the how the brain works and how we think. Cognition is thinking, and so cognitive psychologists study things like how we retain information and apply it and solve problems. Also, many psychologists are counselors, and many are experimental in other areas. You also have developmental psychologists who study growing up and growing older. You also have social and personality psychologists, so these study the social behavior and how people's personalities evolve over time. And then you also have industrial and organizational psychologists. These are people in the workplace that study things like human motivation and are making decisions for companies based on organizations of huge amounts of people. So that should give you a lot to write about, both for your assignments and your discussions for this week. I do not want to frustrate you any longer with the crazy audio situations we have. So I see Katisha's already sent out an email for us, and I will do the same thing, and we'll see if we can conquer some of these problems. I would like to have you type your learning gem into the chat box. So a learning gem is one key thing that you learned from this session. So just pick out the thing that is your biggest takeaway from the course and type it into the chat window, and we call this our roping closure. And if you have any questions after that, I'll hang out for a little while and you can connect, raise your hand or whatever, or just type your question into the chat window after we are done. Are you guys still hearing me okay now? Good. Okay, looks like we're doing our learning gems, so very, very good. Thank you very much for attending the live session for psychology for week 1, and we'll see you next week. But don't forget to type in your learning gem, and see you next time.